Hi class, so tonight we are going to continue our lecture on personality development by looking at the humanists, specifically Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers. And so basically when we get to the humanists, we note a few differences and how they present ideas on growth and development. Mainly we see that with the humanist, we don't have those chronological stages that we see with a lot of the other theorists we have talked about in class, like Erikson and Freud specifically. And so really what we see is, I think that the way that Maslow, or just the humanists in general fit into our ideas of growth and development, is that when we get to the wave of humanistic theory in psychology, we're not really as focused on abnormal behavior as we were more so with the past. Instead, what we see is more ideas of what constitutes healthy development. And so because of that, like I said, we don't see stages, but what we do see with the humanists is this idea of a hierarchy of needs. And basically these needs are just things that we have to have in life in order to survive, and they're crucial to our happiness and optimum well-being. And that really is the main point of the humanist psychologist, is they're looking at or the individual from a holistic perspective, and really focusing on, once again, these positive sides of human behavior and how we can go about, helping people reach these optimal levels of happiness and well-being, okay? And so like I said, these needs are kind of things that we need to survive in life, and they very much relate to our socio-emotional, cognitive, and physical development. And so the humanist, especially Maslow, he felt that in order for people to really grow and develop into their true potential, into being the bestest version of themselves that they can be, or self-actualizing, as Maslow put it, he really thought it came down to motivation. And so he really thought that as human beings, that we all have kind of this inner operating conditioning set of motivations there that kind of relate to the systems of rewards and punishments in our own minds. And we see a little bit of Freud's influence there, because really these unconscious desires, these are kind of the things and goals, the things that we want to achieve in life, the goals that we place for ourselves. And so motivating us to reach those goals, to ascertain those needs, is of key importance. And so when we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, let me move my camera here so we can see that. Oh, oops, hold on, guys. I actually, real quickly, I'll note this top one so you guys can see it, and I'm going to put my camera out of the way. So, basically, Maslow, when he first created this hierarchy of needs, it was based on these five kind of simple categories. And since Maslow came up with this, we have actually expanded some of these stages in the hierarchy, because really the whole point of self-actualization is that even when you reach that tip of the pyramid there, it's not like you're done developing or done learning and growing. And so we've kind of expanded that, as you see with this top one there, to kind of accentuate that idea more, and just kind of show that that some of these needs, we can kind of break them down into smaller steps so they don't seem kind of as overwhelming as when Maslow first presented this information. So that's just the difference in the two hierarchies that I have listed here. And most of the time, for most of the classes, I just kind of stick with the basic one here at the bottom. Alright, so basically this hierarchy of needs is set up to where we have to fulfill our most basic kind of biological self-sustaining needs, and then from there we just kind of build up. And so the first stage there we see are our psychological needs, and those are just basic things: food, water, things like homeostasis, just, having the ability for our bodies to be able to function, especially those automatic nervous system functionings that, the ones that we're not aware of and that keep us alive, and that our brain and our central nervous system does for us, so that we can use our brain power to focus on other things in life. So that's kind of a cool, great thing that our bodies do for us. And so, we have to have that. We have to be alive and be able to maintain our aliveness. And then from there, we then move up the hierarchy. So once we have that, we get then our shelter. And usually going along with our shelter, our security, our safety net. This is when we start seeing things like we get jobs, and maybe we get jobs, we get cars, educations, just anything, or move into certain neighborhoods, move to certain areas, just all those things that relate to safety and us having a place that we can call our own, so that, we can then focus on these other needs and goals that we need to fulfill in life. So from there, we move up to love and belonging. So once you have your basic needs, food, water, shelter, from there, since we're social creatures, we have to then expand that out, and that's when we start socializing, and we look for those intimate relationships. And we have our families as a basic foundation for that. And then as we grow and develop throughout life, we meet and encounter different people. And so we form bonds with some people and maybe not so much with other peoples. But, overall, everybody, I think, that we meet in life plays some role in us, in our development and how we go about learning and growing. And so once we have kind of those love and belonging and those kind of socialization type needs, that then kind of leads to our ideas of ourself and just our confidence and self-esteem. And so when we feel safe, we have those physiological needs met, we feel like we belong in the place that we're at, that then, boosts our esteem. And so we have those needs met on kind of that mental and kind of spiritual and socio-emotional side of our mind and our psyches there, because now we're kind of talking about personality type things. And so once we're able to accomplish all of that in life, then we move up to kind of that last stage of development. And like I said, just because it's the last stage, it doesn't mean that it ends. It just means that it is a continuing process. And basically, once you reach the stage of self-actualization, you have all of your needs met, you're able to kind of relax a little bit more in life and kind of look and view life from more of a utilitarian perspective. So now that you have yourself taken care of, you're able to sit back and think about, well, how can I share my gifts with the rest of society so that I can help everybody else reach this last stage of self-actualization there, okay? So those are the different stages, and it sounds good, it sounds all perfectly laid out, but the problem is that life isn't all that black and white, right? We have social things that come up and prevent us from satisfying these needs. We have environmental things that prevent us from satisfying these needs. And so because of that, Maslow noted that even though every human being that has ever lived on this world and will ever live on this planet has the potential to self-actualize, only about 1 to 2% of human beings ever will. And it's because of the way that just our natural and social environments are set up. So the biggest thing that hinders development, that hinders healthy personalities and just healthy behaviors and thoughts and belief systems is stress. And so that is really the main thing that is preventing most of us in society from truly self-actualizing. Society creates stressors that prevent us from having these needs met. And if we're not having these basic basic needs met, then that prevents us from being able to go into those higher stages of consciousness. In fact, like that's not even going to be on the scope of our radar because we're going to be so focused on those basic survival needs. So think about it. Well, first think about this. If you guys remember back to our video on Freud and psychoanalysis, that Freud had the theory that neuroses existed in societies because overall societies were set up to be neurotic, and so that's then what causes the stress. That then what causes people to allow that stress to to influence them to the point that we start getting into those abnormal behaviors and those kind of mental disorders, things like depression and anxiety are really the main problems. Just a minute, guys, let me pause this. Oh wait, never mind. Alright, and so they just prevent us, sorry about that, from actually, obtaining that level of self-actualization. So think about it. If you are homeless, you're jobless, and, you're living on the streets, the only thing that you're concerned about at that point in your life is those basic needs. You want to make sure you have a safe place to sleep, you want to make sure that you have food, and you want to make sure that you have water. You're so consumed with thinking about having those basic needs met that you can't really get to that point of having that utilitarian perspective. And so that is basically what we are talking about here. Oh, and then let me point this out too. And also, even though this is set up as a hierarchy, once again, like I said, it's not really, it's not set in stone. It doesn't mean that when you get to a level, you automatically move to a next level. It's not static, I guess, or fixed, is what I'm trying to say. It's shaped as a hierarchy, but it's kind of really like a fluctuating, kind of circulating, spiraling type stages there. Because, life experiences and environments in life present us with opportunities as well as challenges, and sometimes those challenges in life can cause us to kind of slide back down the hierarchy here, and that's okay, I think, because just like I said, life presents us with challenges, and I really think that it's in those challenges is where we learn and grow the most. Alright, so that is all the hierarchy of needs explained. And so now what I want to do is go through and talk about these ideas of self-actualization. So, like I said, basically, self-actualization is just realizing our ultimate potential in life. And like I said, the Maslow, the humanists, they look at more of those positive sides of human behavior instead of looking at more of those psychopathologies there. And so humanists, they're really interested in looking at human potential, how we view it inside ourselves, and how we view it in context to the rest of society. And pretty much just the roles that society plays in that development there. So we see, we can really see both the influences of Freud and Erikson in Maslow's thinking here. Because we see, we kind of have those inner unconscious things that we have to work on in our personalities and our behaviors that Freud notes a lot in his psychosexual stages of development. And then we also see where Erikson, it took Freud's ideas and expanded that out to include things like development in context of like social situations. And so we see Maslow kind of combining, and the humanists in general, just kind of combining those ideas too. And so once we finally are able to satisfy our needs, and we're able to get to a point in our life to where we can really focus on our potential, and that's something that we do, just in life by working on our education. That's all steps we take to realizing our true potential and reaching those stages of self-actualization. So it's a process that never stops in life, and like I said, it's kind of a circular, fluctuating process. And that brings up a good point about Plotkin and his stages of development. You can really see with his how he takes the humanist and Erikson and Freud, and then creates that little circular stages of development that he has, that I really want you guys to focus on for the final. And so let's just talk about a little bit about these ideas of self-actualization now. So basically with self-actualization, it's kind of like I said, you find this deeper meaning and importance to life, kind of more of this kind of utilitarian perspective, to where you're able to step back and take a look at the greater good. And it's once again, because we're all unique individuals, our motivation of how we go about doing that is going to change. And so, we see people self-actualizing in many different ways. Sometimes, it can be through art, it can be through sports, it can be through work, it can be through education. And it basically relates to what are our strong points in life, what are those gifts that we have in society, and how do we best utilize those gifts. Supposedly self-actualized people, they've kind of have a better idea on how to use their gifts in society. And so because of that, I would say that self-actualizing does come with age and experience, and it probably is something that once we hit middle adulthood, we're actually able to actually achieve and start getting into that stage there. And then I think that's something that we spend some time on in later adulthood too. And so for this idea of self-actualization, the way that Maslow went about developing these ideas for self-actualization, he had this concept of peak experiences. And really what peak experiences are, it's just kind of those little things in life that just make you enjoy the simplicity of life. It gives you, just those feelings of euphoria, joy, wonder, something like the sunset, a full moon, seeing your child laugh, seeing animals born, seeing a baby born. It's just, those really just kind of stop and smell the roses type moments in life. And that's kind of how, when you have those basic needs met, is when we're able to take the time to be more mindful of everything else around us. And so we can see how society kind of creates a lot of obstacles to us being able to achieve that. But once again, it is possible for each of us to achieve these characteristics and these stages of self-actualization. And so my last little point there was the idea of we have to be the master maker. So that's really, the idea of self-actualization. It's not about perfection. It's just about, simply working on ourselves and realizing that we're all works in process, and that development is a continuous thing that never ends until, death. Death is the final stage of development, and that's when our development ends in this life, and then we go on or not. That just depends on what everybody believes. So it's important to note, self-actualization does not mean perfection. And so on the last slide, my last point was this idea that we have to be the master maker. So basically, the master maker is somebody who has taken his gifts, his skill in society, and he has put the education and the experience in to shape that gift into something that is beautiful and that is presentable to society. And so what the master maker learns is that in perfecting and shaping his craft and shaping his gift, he realizes that he is never done. Because when you create a work of art, in whatever context you would consider that what that creation to be, there's always room for improvement. And so that's something that the master maker realizes. If you look at Plotkin's stages of development, I believe it's the sage. That's a pretty common archetype for kind of the individual in societies, or that represent kind of wisdom and experience there. Alright, so most interestingly is that Maslow came up with these ideas of self-actualization, and I have the time, the date there as 1970, but I believe he first published his paper on the hierarchy of needs in 1954. I swear he did something in 1954. So we'll just say between the 50s and 60s, and that's kind of a good time period for the humanists too. That's probably that is about when that wave of that wave entered psychology too. So interestingly, so he came up with these ideas of self-actualization and characteristics that he defined as a self-actualized individual based on historical people, and some of those people were Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, Eleanor Roosevelt, James Adams, William James, and his name should sound familiar. That is the father of American psychology. He was one of the biggest proponent of the second wave of psychology, functionalism. He actually, William James is one of my favorite psychologists. I talk about him a little bit more in general psychology when we go into the ideas of consciousness, because he really has a lot of contributions in what we think of consciousness, and interesting guy just all around. And then we also see people like Huxley. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He has the one great book. It's called A Brave New World, and it's kind of all about this futuristic society where they kind of like genetically manufacture humans, and the way they go about doing it is pretty much they're like setting people up into classes, so the people with the best genes are at the top of society and they get everything, while the people who are less desired are kind of at the bottom of society, and they're kind of like all deformed and just have no emotions. And then separate from that, there's like a planet of kind of humans, and they're kind of like primitive, savage type humans. It's kind of like they're back in Neanderthal, kind of prehistoric days, running around, and so yeah, just a really interesting social commentary there. If you've never read Huxley, and he also, I think he might have did a book called The Invisible Man too, not the Stevenson Invisible Man, but another one there. And then we also have people like Spinoza, and Spinoza is a famous kind of a famous philosopher. And then of course we see people like Albert Einstein, and I would believe now, I would add people like Muhammad Gandhi, I can't think of his name, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr., people like Jane Goodall. There's a great psychologist who is, I believe, she is in her 90s now, and she is still out just kicking it and working as hard as ever. Her name is Joanna Macy. She's a really great one. If you ever are bored and want to look up a famous psychologist, she's a really good one to go look at. She's kind of more into eco-psychology, transpersonal psychology there. But anyway, I would include those type of people too, because I see the characteristics I'm going to show you guys in a minute emulated in the way those people lived and still live their life, because of course Jane Goodall and Joanna Macy are still alive there. And then I would challenge a couple of these that he's talking about. I guess specifically I'm thinking about Thomas Jefferson. When you think of, Thomas Jefferson did some great things, but then when it comes to his kind of attitudes and behavior when it came to things like slavery and racism, I would have to question if I would consider those to be factors in self-actualization, and I'd say they're not, and I think that maybe Maslow just kind of ignored those parts of Jefferson's life. I mean, I don't know, I'm speculating, but I would think he would have had to include him on this list. And so, anyway, my little 2 cents there of how I disagree with that one choice there. And there is just a link there if you guys want to go and look a little bit more into some of these ideas. I got a link there for you. Okay, so in order to be self-actualized, before we start getting into looking at those characteristics, Maslow had a list of behaviors that he felt helped one be more likely or to progress a little easier or easily to that stage of self-actualization. And so basically, people who experience life kind of like a child, and kind of like a child in the innocence of viewing everything in life as fresh and a new experience for you to kind of go out and tackle. Self-actualized, or behaviors that lead to self-actualization are people, they don't stay stuck in comfort zones, they don't stay stuck in dogmatic ideology. They're kind of adventurous people in many ways. If we were to look at Jung's archetypes, we could say that they are the fools. There's that saying that fools go in where angels dare to tread, or something like that. It's like the fools will jump in, but even the angels won't go in some situations. And it's just noting that idea of experiencing everything in life as just being new and wondrous, and not really calculating out all the consequences and risk at time, because you're still experiencing. And so in many ways, the fool is not a fool because he's stupid. He's a fool just because he's kind of innocent and doesn't have those life experience yet. And then another aspect of a behavior that leads to self-actualization is that self-actualized people, they're a little bit more intuitive. That they're a little bit more with going on their gut instincts and listening to their kind of voice of consciousness inside of them, instead of really going with just accepting what society says because it's society and it's supposedly rules. And so a good way to think about that has to do with Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation. I know that's exactly, I think, why Maslow picked him, and he's like the number one people we note as self-actualized, because by freeing the slaves like Lincoln did, he was taking this utilitarian perspective and realizing that if we want life to be good, if we want our society, our American culture to be good, we really did have to step back and make sure that all members of this culture were treated in fair ways, because that's kind of the whole point of the Article of Declarations in our Constitution. The right for every man, woman, and child, to life, liberty, death, happiness. That what it says in there. So anyway. So it's not so much as like just deviant behavior just to kind of like cause destruction in society. It's more of that deviant type of behavior that leads to positive things. So that's why I would include people like Mandela and Gandhi. Oh, the Dalai Lama too, he's another good one. And Martin Luther King Jr., it's because of their work in ending segregation and just what they did with the civil rights movement too. And so to be more on that path to self-actualization, honesty is key. And honesty is the key to everything in life. If we just, with all this talk about fake news nowadays, it's really hard for us to really discern what is real and honest and what is not, or just even why there would even be that question anyway. As human beings, we're social creatures that need each other to get along, and we can't get along with each other when we're always being dishonest and having these pretenses. And who knows why people decide to play games that they do, but in life, the best thing to do is to always, once again, go with your own voice of consciousness and be the best person and most honest person you can be inside yourself, regardless of everybody else. We all have the opportunity to set that positive example for others, and it works better in life if we try to set that positive example and kind of build others up rather than letting them tear us down. And so then that next point there, number 5, kind of goes back to it goes along with exactly what I'm talking about with these ideas of deviant behavior and listening to the voice of consciousness there. And a good thing, and so a good point then to add is this idea of being honest and not having pretenses, is that people who are self-actualized, they're willing to take responsibility and accountability for their actions, and they work hard to achieve what they want in life. I do believe that the natural law of the universe and of life is just good things. We're not put on this earth or in this life just to be screwed over, no matter how much life challenges us or throws stresses at us. Like I said, I just think it's part of the learning and growing process. And overall, that process is for good, positive, productive things to happen. That's like the number one natural law of the universe. So that's why, our power of thought really plays a role in how we go about living and shaping our lives. So, if you always think negatively, the universe is going to give you back negativity. When you can try to focus more on those positive and productive things, the universe will naturally gravitate those things in your life. And you can't get that by just sitting on your couch. You have to put the hard work in, and you have to be willing to take responsibility and accountability for your actions, even if nobody else is doing it in society. And then going along with that, it's okay to admit when you're wrong. So that's kind of what that last part is kind of about too. It's like, not everybody's perfect. Not everybody's always right in what we think and believe and how we behave. And that's okay. We're all here to learn and grow together. And, we have to be willing to say, I'm not perfect. I'm sorry, or I was wrong. And then we have to, have that courage and kindness with ourselves and with others to not give up in life. Be like, well, it's okay that I'm not perfect, but I can still keep working to try to do better. Alright, so those are our behaviors that lead to self-actualization, and so now we have our 15 characteristics here, and you see that basically a lot of these correlate with those behaviors leading up to the actual self-actualized stage. And so we see once you reach self-actualization, a good point there is that we see that things in life are not perfect, that things don't always go perfectly, don't always go to our perceptions, our expectations, and that's okay. Self-actualized people, they're able to be flexible, able to adapt, able to flexecute, like I like to say, to where, if things don't go right, they can think on their feet and they can, change that situation. And then just in that, and in doing that, they accept, they're not perfect and nobody else is perfect. So you have to work on it. And so they're very problem-centered. So what we see with self-actualized people is they're not very egocentric. And they have a spontaneity in thought and action that goes along with those ideas of being able to flexecute. They can look at life objectively. So, they're really in touch with their emotions and they know, and their emotional intelligence, and so they know how to kind of be more objective and just not kind of go quite to that emotional response that as humans we're so likely to do. And once again, even at that, just because you're self-actualized and you've learned and you figured out a little bit more about your emotional states and your emotional intelligence, it still doesn't mean that you're not going to mess up and give in. And even the Dalai Lama talks about how, people think that, he never gets angry and things like that. But he says, no, I'm only human. I get angry too. It's just that my beliefs in Buddhism allow me to handle that anger in a different way so that I'm not just leasing undestructive forces onto society. Because that's really what happens when we get stuck in anger. We're just really wasting our energy, and it's not positive or productive for us at all. And so we also see that self-actualized people, they're really creative. They have these peak experiences. They have that concern for humanity's welfare. They're, based on those peak experiences, they can appreciate those basic life experiences. They have those kind of democratic attitudes and ideas, and they have very strong moral and ethical standards. And they're also people that, even though they take these expanded perspectives on helping others, they're still very private people who kind of keep to themselves for the most part. Alright, and so there's still very private people that keep to themselves for the most part, and I think that's kind of important too, because it kind of hints on some of these ideas of mindfulness, to truly give our best to ourselves, our families, our friends, our co-workers, society in general. We have to take that time to slow down and to step back and reflect and be mindful. It's kind of like charging up your phone, guys. Think of it that way. Your phone just can't always be on and you always using it. At some point you have to give it a break. You have to put it on a charger and let it recharge yourself. And that's basically what we're talking about with a lot of these characteristics for self-actualization. The way that we really reach that is with mindfulness and just, taking that time to balance, the hectic chaosness that society creates with, a more relaxed and kind of simplified life, to where we have time for reflection. And, so that's why these ideas of being able to take time out in nature, or to, find a mindfulness-based practice that works for you, are good ones, because they're good, positive, healthy things we can do for our development. Alright, so next we're going to look at Carl Rogers. So basically what Carl Rogers does is that he kind of takes these ideas of self-actualization, and I think he makes it to where it sounds a little more manageable and not so overwhelming as Maslow talks about. I mean, these people I've mentioned that Maslow says are self-actualized, and the ones that I'm saying are self-actualized, some of those people have done, some really extraordinary things in society that none of us, not that I'm trying to discourage anybody, but that most of us won't ever be allotted the opportunity to do. And so it just seems kind of overwhelming, and it's like, we're trying to fill like shoes bigger than we can fit type thing. And so I think Carl Rogers, he just kind of breaks it down a little bit more to kind of, create, to not create kind of that anxiety that I think, that looking at all that self-actualization thing, it kind of does create, and in a way it can kind of get into that obsessive compulsive type of personalities and attitudes, to where like you're so focused on self-actualizing that it can actually be detrimental to your development instead of a healthy thing, if you guys know what I mean. And so like I said, so Carl Rogers kind of brings it back and makes it a little bit more understandable for that other 98% of ourselves. And so basically what Carl Rogers does is that he takes these ideas of Maslow, and he said that for people to have healthy development in their life, it really starts in, or it really begins with the environments that people surround themselves with or put themselves in. And so just like Freud, just like Piaget, just like Vygotsky, Rogers thought that those environments and those relationships that we formed while we were in those early stages of development in childhood, that those were the key foundations for how we could and would develop into healthy, functioning adults. And so, in a way, he kind of looked at us as like we're like little trees or like little flowers. And if you don't have that proper soil, you don't have that proper sunlight, you don't give it the proper water and nutrients that it needs, you can't ever expect that little tree or that little flower to grow into, a healthy, beautiful thing. And as human beings, we're the same way. We need those basic ingredients, to help us grow into the best versions of ourselves that we can be. And so So basically what Carl Rogers believed, he believed that as human beings, the one basic motivation that we had was this potential, this ability, or this desire, we can say, to become the best human beings that we can be. And and so we all have the motivation to be able to do that, but because we're all unique individuals, of course we're going to go about it in different way, or achieving those steps of self-actualization, or what actually Rogers calls self-concept, in other ways, or just being the best version of ourselves that we are. So Rogers, just like all the other humanists, once again, he's looking more at positive aspects of the mind-body connection and what it means to be human. So we thought that, people innately, he's kind of more on the nature side of the kind of, what makes us human, nature versus nurture debate. He's kind of on that tabula rasa, is that we're born these blank slates. So ultimately, that does mean that we are just all good. And creative, too. He believed that creativity was a key part to being human, because, what really is creativity? It's our ability to think of things and to solve problems. And that is, ultimately how we evolve, how we develop as individuals and as a society, especially as a collective. And when we look at the whole human evolution overall, our technological innovations, those are all creative endeavors. And so since Carl Rogers believed that we're all really good by nature, so we thought that is, it was some kind of external stimuli, external factor that kind of causes people to slip at that paths and kind of, reach more into those psychopathologies, or maybe more negative and destructive behaviors. And so Maslow thought that, one reason that people would, get off the path of self-actualization and turn more to those constructive behaviors, it's all because it's really a kind of how we view ourselves and then how we really are in the world thing. And so this is what we see by Maslow's idea of self-concept. It's how do we view ourselves, and then what are the opportunities that society allots us in life that allows us to become more of that person that we want to be. And so Maslow thought that once we had all those basic needs in society met, we're able to actually focus on kind of this inner development and reach these stages of actualization. We had to have these different views of ourselves in congruence. And so basically what he thought needed to be in congruence was our idea selves, and that's who we want to be, and then our self-image. And our self-image is basically how we really are. Alright, and so when we have our our idea self and our self-image in congruence, this is when we become a fully functioning individual. And basically a fully functioning individual is a self-actualized individual, but much like everything else in psychology, everybody has their own little individual thing to contribute, and in doing that they come up with their own terminology and their own ideas. And so we just got to remember that we're talking about the humanistics psychologist overall. So the main points are that people need unconditional love, people have the potential to be the best versions of themselves, people are ultimately good by nature. I mean, these are the things that we're really talking about. And then the main thing with Rogers there was the idea of, like I said, childhood experiences and environments are what really helped us to become, to move along that path of self-actualization. And so basically, this idea of a fully functioning person is it comes when you have all these when you have your goals and your needs met, and then you're able to focus on taking those gifts you have on society and kind of working them more. And he thought that basically, we don't reach that fully functioning stage because of, like I've said, just environmental stressors. There are things that come up in life that challenge us, and we're not able to move up those stages. However, the good thing about that is that because life is a continuous journey, just because, say, we get stuck on a stage, or maybe we even move backwards a stage, we always have that opportunity, to keep moving forward, or to keep, spiraling back around, however you want to fully view that. And so it's important that we have these positive, healthy environments in childhood. That is basically what we have discussed all a semester in class. And when we're able to have those things, that is then when we start developing these characteristics that helps put us on that fully functioning / self-actualized path. And so 5 characteristics here are open to experience, existential living, trust feelings, creativity, and fulfilled life. And so a fully functioning individuals is, just like with self-actualized, they're very open to experiences in life. They're very accepting of themselves and accepting of others, realizing, everybody is a work in progress. And I talk a lot about these ideas of positive thoughts and being positive in production and productive in society and being that positive agent of social change. And when I say that really is, the best way to live in life. But that doesn't mean that we just deny negative things and negative emotions in life. It's kind of you have to kind of take more of that objective perspective to life and realize that, once again, since nobody is perfect, there are going to be negative things that happen in life, and you just have to keep working on learning to deal with those and making those experiences and those emotions and thoughts kind of less in your life. And then with existential living, I'm so sorry, I got all my windows open. I guess I got pollen making my nose itch. So existential living is just they're able to view life objectively. They don't have a lot of prejudice, pretenses, or just preconceptions about things in life. They can experience differences in life. They're kind of they're those flexecutable skills that I've talked about. They once again, they listen more to their gut instinct and their little voice of consciousness. They are once again, these are the risk takers, the creative thinkers. And then a characteristic of a fully functioning individual is somebody who just has a fulfilled life. So ultimately, they're happy and satisfied with life, and they're just always looking for new ways to learn and grow. And so once somebody is able to become fully functioning, we see they're well-dressed and well-balanced, and according to Rogers, these are interesting people to know. And we see that a lot of times they're high achievers in society. Interestingly, though, I'm not sure of whom Rogers identified as fully functioning people. That'd be something interesting to look at. And so to be able to, to have this, to be self-actualized, to be fully functioning, once again, we go back to this idea of self-concept, and it's just, marrying together that those ways that we view ourselves inside our head and how we want to be in life, and then the way that we actually are in life, and kind of, the opportunities and the challenges that society puts for us in life. So we want to be able to, once again, bring those two perspectives into balance. And so we just see, bring it into balance or bring it into congruence. And so we just see kind of with the rest of the slide, just kind of talk about some different ideas of what we define as the self. Alright, and so from the humanistic approach, we see that there are 3 components that actually make up our self. This is, kind of our true identity, who we really are on the inside. I guess Freud would say more of our these are more reflective of our psyche and kind of more of those unconscious behaviors. in our unconscious. And so we see that those three components are our self-worth, or that's how we think of ourselves and others, our self-image, how we see ourselves. And that's really important to having a healthy development and just a healthy view of self in general. We always want to see ourselves as just simply as we are, good, bad, ugly, beautiful, it doesn't matter. We have to embrace ourselves as the whole individuals and accept our sides of ourself. And because our self-image, that really is what has the most effect on how people really go about, just living and engaging in the world. And then we all have this the ideal self, and that's always the person that we want to be. And as we go through life and go through our stages of development, our ideal self will always changes. And it just, once again, it depends on our experiences in life. It depends on our goals, whether we accomplish those goals or not. And, life sometimes has a way of, we set out with a specific set of goals that we think we're going to achieve, and then we go through life and realize that it didn't work out that way yet, and maybe you get a little down because of that. But then, life has this funny way of giving you other opportunities that you hadn't thought about, and so, you're able to change your goals and ambitions in life and just kind of, once again, just keep going forward. Alright, so once again, since those childhood environments are really crucial into, our self-concept, Carl Rogers believed that in early child development, we needed positive regard and a healthy sense of self-worth. And so, just both of those things just lead to, how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about in life. And so when we have high self-worth, we see we're able to, tune in to more of those positive energies in life and have more confidence and to keep moving forward. But we see when we have those low self-worths that, we can life can be a little bit more difficult because we're a little more fixed and rigid in how we go about living our lives. And so, it's important for, those people to change their ideas of self-worth. And then, in creating that self-worth, it comes down to these ideas of positive regard. And, in order to have confidence and be able to tune more into the positivity in life, we have to have that positive regard. We have to be able to feel valued, respected, and have affection and love in our life, because that's what creates good social interaction and social bonds. And so in looking at this idea of positive regard, we have to break it up into two types: unconditional and conditional. And basically what we see is, when you have that unconditional positive regard, this is the one that, no matter what happens in life, no matter what you do, there are people, your mate, your parents, mate and family specifically, that love you no matter what, because, we all realize that sometimes things go wrong, sometimes people make mistakes, and, when you have that unconditional positive regard, Rogers thought that people were more likely to to have better self-concepts of themselves, to have those better self-concepts and kind of be more positive and productive individuals. Whereas with anything in life, once we put a condition on it, then, it's kind of, we've put a condition on it. We have stopped that kind of learning and growing process because we say, okay, this is it. This is all you're going to get, no matter what you do. You've reached your kind of glass ceiling of positive regard. And we could see how just in that idea alone, how that can relate to kind of, unhealthy self-concepts, unhealthy ideas of self-esteem and self-worth. And then that can kind of lead to psychopathologies too. Alright, so now we just kind of see just a little chart here and a little bit more expansion on these ideas of congruency. And so basically what we see here is that, it's that healthy balance there when we have, kind of that balanced overlap of that idea self and the idea self image is when we're able, to be able to reach those stages of self-actualization and be that fully functioning individual. And what we see with congruencies too is that, it's once again, it's something that develops throughout life, and it's something that's going to fluctuate depending on where we're at in life. Sometimes we'll have a good, we'll have that congruency and it'll be good, and then maybe it'll go down. And, the good thing about it is that even if we do have that congruent and something happens in life that kind of unbalances those two, we can always work to bring that congruency back together again. And so, just to wrap it up here, so when we see that we're all working on balancing out those two different versions of ourselves and getting through that congruency, and we see a lot of time those the reasons that we would get into states of incongruency is it has to do with how we view ourselves, how we do the rest of the world, and just finding ways to mediate between those two. So, life's not always going to go our way, and we have to learn. And, when we have that healthy state of congruence is when we're able to realize that and not stay stuck down in those negative kind of, negative emotions and thoughts. Alright guys, so that wraps up our lecture on the humanist, and what I have for you is a couple tests for fun for you guys to go take, and just to, one page, one paragraph. I'm not looking for anything too long here. I want you guys to go take Maslow's self-actualized test and then answer these 3 questions based on your result. I will have a Dropbox set up in Canvas, or I have a Dropbox set up in Canvas for you to be able to go submit that. I would like to see it at least submitted before the end of class. It's a really fun test to take, and it's not anything serious, so just keep that in mind. And then next, I have the Rorschach test for you, and just kind of the same thing there, just page, paragraph, looking at that and looking at your results. And like I said, they're both really fun tests. They do kind of relate to these ideas of personality that we have been focusing on in class, because, personality is a key part of our socio-emotional, cognitive, and physical development. And so that is all for this lecture. We'll continue on by looking at development in middle adulthood with our next lecture. So thanks guys.